Welcome to the Monday, July 23rd, 2012 meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Here.
Commissioner Sahakian,
Here.
Commissioner Yakubian, Commissioner Mangasarian,
Here.
Chairperson Fod.
Here. May we rise and salute our country's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda, please.
Item 2 is posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, July 23rd, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, July 20th, 2012 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Next item, please.
Item 3, approval of minutes, June 25th, 2012 regular meeting.
Have we had a chance to look at it? Any comments?
No comments. No comments. I move to approve.
Second?
Second.
I guess we don't need to take a formal motion, correct?
No.
Next item?
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I haven't received any cards for oral communication, so let's move on to our next item.
Item 5 is an action item. Item 5A is report regarding installation of speed humps on Allen Avenue between Lake Street and the Freeway 5 overpass. Item 5.1 is motion approving installation of 2 speed humps on Allen Avenue between Lake Street and the Freeway 5 overpass.
Mr. Magdania?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Parking Commission, I want to walk you through very quickly on the request for installation of speed humps on Allen between Lake and Freeway 5 overpass. This is just a general area that shows the location of Allen, which is between, basically to the south is Victory, and further to the north is Flower Street. This is an aerial photo that shows essentially, again, the same thing at its proximity to the 5 freeway, where essentially traffic is speeding through this neighborhood. This shows Allen facing northbound toward Flower Street, just to give you an idea about the on-street parking, residential nature of this street. And this is showing Allen facing northbound toward Flower Street. Again, the same thing with on-street parking available, and there's some commercial in that area as well. Quickly, the residents on Allen requested traffic calming. They concern about the speeding that is occurring, that's because of the adjacent businesses. And as we are required as part of our traffic calming program, we did 24-hour counts, we did speed surveys, we did a field check. And essentially, if you look at our, if I may go back, please, to the last slide. As part of our traffic calming program, this segment of Allen Street does meet the requirements for installation of speed humps. Primarily, the volume should be between 1,000 to 10,000. The minimum is 1,000. Street carries 1738. The 85th percentile should be 30, and this is at 32 miles per hour. It's not a fire emergency response route. It meets the street width, and almost 85% of the residents have petitioned for this installation of the speed humps. Essentially, there are 34 residents, 21 of which have signed the petition, and there was one resident who has called us and said they were not in favor of installation of the speed humps. Staff has reviewed this petition. We believe that it meets the requirements of installation of speed humps on Allen, and it's similar to other locations that we have installed speed humps. And we are recommending the installation of 2 speed humps between Lake and Freeway. One thing we have to keep in mind is that because of the construction that is currently underway on the I-5, there are guardrails that are curbs that are installed underneath the overpass, and we may not be able to install them immediately. We have to wait until the construction of that is over, and that construction we follow on a regular basis, and it shifts from one segment to the other. So as soon as we know we can install the speed humps on the other side of the overpass, we will do that as part of one of our projects. That concludes my presentation. Mr. Chairman, also I wanted to let you know that I've invited Jeff Halbert, Fire Marshal, from a fire department, in case you have questions on this one. Maybe not, if you have questions about the Western Avenue item. And Lieutenant Steve Robertson from the Police Department is also here, in case the Commission has any questions for them.
Well, I have one speaker card for the Allen Avenue speed bumps, Vilma, I'm sorry. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Vilma Vera. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I live at 531 Allen Avenue, and I'm here on my behalf and on behalf of the neighbors that couldn't come today. Last January, we made a request to the Traffic and Transportation Department to see if they could install speed humps, because right now we're having a lot of traffic and there's a lot of speed going on. At the past 3 years, 3 dogs and 2 cats were killed. And last year, one of my sons was almost run over by this crazy guy who was, I don't know, was drunk, or he was going more than 60 miles per hour. So, and some neighbors, they don't feel the need to call the city or call to the right department to complain about their dogs or their cats were killed, because they think that, okay, who's going to pay attention to that? And I believe that animals, they do have rights too. So that's why we were requesting, to your department to install those speed humps. So it will, I would say, it's going to prevent of these people going that way and speeding, and probably the traffic is going to be a lot less. They will use probably other streets because sometimes they use Allen Street as an alley to go to the either Victory or to go towards Alameda Street. So that's why we made that request, and all the neighbors were hoping that you'll take that in consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
I just wanted to ask the speaker a question. The problems that you have with speeding, is it typically one way or the other, or is it both ways? It happens both ways?
Both ways,
okay.
Yeah. As soon as they turn right or left on Allen, either coming from Lake or Flower, it's the same thing.
So it's not more one way or the other?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other comments? Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
Second?
I second.
A roll call, please.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sahakian,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian, Commissioner Mangasarian,
Yes.
Chairperson Fod.
Yes. Next
Item
please.
5B is report regarding request for installation of speed humps on Western Avenue between Mountain Street and Bel Air Drive. Item 5B1, motion concurring with the denial by the Director of Public Works for installation of 4 speed humps on Western Avenue between Mountain Street and Bel Air Drive.
Mr. Bagdanian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to quickly present this item. Would you please go to the next for me? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, this is a request for installation of speed humps on Western between Mountain and Bel Air. Again, as shown in this exhibit, essentially this is the terminus of Western Avenue, where it ends at the Brand Park. And the area, one of the reasons Western technically carries more traffic than the other streets to the east and west of it, because it does go all the way to the 5 freeway and then further to 134 that where it connects to 134. So essentially this segment of Western, starting at Mountain all the way down to Glen Oaks, carries a lot of traffic, and it's a very busy street, especially on the 100 block north of Glen Oaks, because there's more multifamily residential, there's markets, and so on. This exhibit shows you the location of the aerial photo of Western Avenue in the same limits. And this is more of a close-up where it shows the Brand Park to the north and Fire Station 21. The reason I want to mention that because the response to any public facilities is very important for our fire department. So anytime any traffic calming measures or devices are installed, we look at the location of the fire station and see how the distance, how far is it from the location of the speed humps, and how we can, fire department can respond should there be any speed hump installations. This is strictly showing Western Avenue toward Mountain Street facing northbound. This is facing southbound. The street is a narrow street, and it is parking on both sides because of the residential nature of the street. And honestly, we are surprised with the volume as well as the speeds that even on this narrow segment of Western, that this street experiences compared to other streets. So this is Western Avenue facing southbound. Again, parking on both sides, residential driveways. We have received a petition from the residents as a result of excessive speeding and through traffic that is going through. And we've done our speed surveys, we've done a traffic count, field checks, and as you can see in this table that we use for evaluation of installation of speed humps, one of the only guidelines that is not met technically is the fire emergency response route. And that is a concern where in the past staff has recommended with input from the fire department anytime we have a fire emergency response route that we do not install speed humps on that segment or a street of that nature. What does have, it's important to note about Western, it does carry a lot of traffic, again about 1,677. And also the distances down below, I have included the distances and what the average daily traffic is of various segments of Western. And as you can see, Western at Glen Oaks, there's 9,800 cars that are traveling in that segment of Western between Glen Oaks and Glenwood. So it carries a lot of traffic which is coming down. Farther north is about 1,600. As you're coming from Brand Park down, it gets reduced. But at the south end near Glen Oaks, it carries a lot of traffic. We have, as part of our speed surveys, we've looked at what the breakdown of the speeds are on the top, what the speeds are on the top, and we also have it by the time of the day. Essentially between 2 and 3 p.m. is where the most number of vehicles are traveling and are speeding in that time frame. Most of the time this is useful because we provide this information to the police department. So if they're going to send any resources or police officers out there to do any enforcement, at least they're looking at the time where the most of the speeders and the traffic volume is. So the peak hour on Western is between 2 and 3. This is also shows the peak volumes from different times of the day. We've been able to graph this. Again, at about 2 o'clock is this point where the volume is at its highest, 113 vehicles. And then this graph basically, we've graphed the speed profile on Western in this segment. Basically, it's a pretty nice bell-shaped curve. However, it's somewhat shifted to the right. It's toward higher speeds. Normally, this is a little bit shifted to the left, and the speed should be between 28 to 29 miles per hour. But right, that's at the midpoint. But as you can go toward the right, where you're exceeding the speed limit at 25 miles per hour, as you can see, we have, for example, on the day that we counted, 112 vehicles that are traveling at 34 to 35 miles per hour, 95 that are in the 36 to 37, We even have some 33 vehicles that are traveling at a speed of 42 plus. So we've grouped them together. So again, from a staff, we've looked at some of these streets, and unfortunately, the street, although it's narrow, there's on-street parking, but there is people that are, I think, are going to the freeway and or coming back from the freeway or going to the park, and that's we believe that's the reasons that they're speeding. The speed humps meets the requirements for installation of speed humps. 36 out of 41 residents have been in favor of it. One resident has also wrote and signed a petition. One resident did not sign, and two have called and they were not in support of that. And I have two letters. One of them is in favor, one of them is against. But technically, it does meet the requirements. Essentially, we're following our guidelines that anytime a street does not meet all the requirements, specifically, if it didn't meet the speed or volume requirement, we usually recommend to the Transportation Parking Commission not to install speed humps. In this case, it does meet the volume and speed requirements. However, it is on the fire emergency response route. And I like, Mr. Chairman, after my presentation, that we invite Jeff Halbert in order to Fire Marshal to give you an overview of why fire is against when it comes to the fire emergency response, or what are the issues that they're concerned about, and collectively we can decide what is the best thing to do in this case. What we plan to do, if the speed hump installation is not approved, we're not recommending at this stage, but that we installed speed limit signs, we installed 24-hour marking on the pavement, and we have a radar display sign that displays the speed of vehicles, oncoming vehicles. It's a temporary or portable sign that we install in neighborhoods where we have speeding problems. We will install that on Western so that it can catch the attention of people who are riding it. It's more of an information, it's more of a warning device, and whether or not it will really lower the speed, we have not been able to detect it, but at least it's a way of telling people to slow down once their speed is over the 25 miles per hour. I've talked to Lieutenant Robertson to have more selective enforcement on this street as a result of the speeding profile that we have, to see if we can catch people who are speeding in a residential street and lower that speed. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have as I mentioned, this was what was requested by the residents. If we were to put in speed humps, it will require 4 speed humps in order to lower the speed of that. Since the staff presentation report has gone out, we've received calls or comments that what if instead of 4 speed humps, we put in 2 speed humps, thereby reduce the impact on the fire emergency. And I like to have Fire Marshal Halbert also address that from the fire standpoint, because we're okay. It's not ideal when you put in, instead of 4, you put in 2. We have to space them at the maximum, and we have stop sign control. So in that case, instead of putting 4, you have to put these 2. But again, it's an issue that we need to be concerned with the fire response time. So that's something I would like to have Jeff Halpert give you input on that.
Yeah, please come up, Mr. Halpert. I know the residents very much want this, particularly in view of the speeding, so please tell us why you think it doesn't work for you.
Yes, I'll be happy to, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I prepared just a very brief couple of slides just to maybe review, give you an overview. This is a map that was prepared years ago by our retired Battalion Chief Steve Howard in conjunction with our Traffic and Engineering Department. This map was intended to identify the emergency response routes. He carefully studied the entire city, and this was the result of that study. Now, obviously, this is a little bit hard to read. However, the next slide will show you a close-up of the area in question. So, if you can see it, you'll see Fire Station 27 on the bottom left of the screen, and the street immediately in front of it is Western Avenue. If you follow Western up on the screen, that last segment of Western is the same segment that's of interest for the hearing tonight. You will notice that beyond that point is where Brand Park and the Brand Library complex is. This is a significant area because it's our wildland urban interface area. We have brush fires in this area. Response time is critical. And you'll notice that giving access from Glen Oaks or San Fernando or any of the major cross streets going north into the WUI area, we only have Western and we have Grandview. The other streets are not designated as fire response routes going up to Mountain. Next slide. This is an aerial view of the area. I would imagine that most you're all familiar with the area. You know, you have the neighborhood on the left side of the picture and the Brand Park complex and the surrounding area on the right. The concerns we have are impacts to response time. These are non-negligible impacts. Patient care impacts, when we are caring for patients in an ambulance, going over speed bumps definitely has impacts on patient care. We have access to the wildland urban interface, as I mentioned. Western is a major access route, not only for us, but for our mutual aid fire departments that come to render assistance to us, which we have used in the past. Coming off the 5 freeway, Western is the closest and most logical exit that has been used. And it is identified on that map that I referred to as a fire response route. The street in question is the longest segment on Western between Glen Oaks and Mountain. It has a steady grade, roughly 5% heading in the northerly direction. As we approach speed bumps, we need to slow down and then go over them and then start to accelerate again. But on a street as long as Western with a steady grade, that becomes more and more challenging. Brand Park alone, I checked our responses. We had, on average, 20 to 25 incidents or responses there per year. These are the locations. This is just kind of a general information about our fire station locations. I apologize, it's a little bit hard to read, but the pointer is on Station 27. The next due station would be 26, which would be at Brand and Stocker. And then our neighbors from Burbank would be the next closest units into this neighborhood. I think that's the last slide. I'll be happy to try to answer any question. I guess the question came up of 4 versus 2. Is that a problem? Can we deal with that? And I guess my response to that would be that since Western is identified as a fire response route, our concern is not only the impacts immediately on Western, but also the precedents that it would set. So our position is one of opposition to speed bumps in general, and on fire response routes in particular.
Well, you mentioned non-negligible response. What does that mean?
Studies have shown the impact is roughly 5 to 10 seconds per device.
So if we put 2, for instance, that would be 20 seconds?
Theoretically, right. But again, those studies weren't necessarily done on grades. This is at a slight grade, so it could be slightly more. We don't know exactly, but those are studies that have been done in the past.
And we're discussing bumps, not lumps. Would these have the indentation?
Mr. Chairman, given the width of the Western is narrow, unfortunately we cannot put the lumps in. We did talk about with the fire department because it will not, we have to almost center it, and there's not enough width to do that. So only it works when it's wider than 30 feet.
Well, I mean, why can't you center it?
Oh, we have to have 2 openings.
Well, that's what I mean. You have two.
Yeah, we have parking on both
if
sides.
the trucks go up there, the wheels have to go someplace. So why wouldn't you put the bumps where the wheels would normally go without the bumps?
At locations that we have put in the humps, most of the time, fire department has with their truck. They like to go. They have to have some distance from both sides. And once you lay out the humps, it just puts it right next to the vehicles when the street gets narrower.
But you see my question. The trucks are going up there anyway.
I think an additional challenge in this particular location is as Mr. Bagania mentioned, the width of the street. Because there is parking allowed on both sides, there's not enough width to allow vehicles to pull over and allow us to pass using the indentations.
But how would that? Maybe I'm missing the point. I mean, why? I mean, because a truck would have to go around maybe a vehicle that was driving, therefore they wouldn't match the indentations?
Yeah.
Right. If the street were 6 feet wider or there was no parking, Theoretically, lumps could work, but given the constraints we have with parking and the 30-foot width, it's not amenable to lumps.
Mr. Chairman, also if we're looking at passenger vehicles, if we've observed there's like pickup trucks or larger trucks that are parking, they get much closer to that indentation. If they're parking right at the curb, it's easier. But when they park farther from the curb, they're very close to, let's say we have two openings for the truck to go by. If they farther to the fire department, talking to the fire folks, they like to have some kind of a clearance on both sides. So if that is in the middle even, if some cars parking, they can't really, in that emergency time frame, they cannot really line up themselves to the middle. So if there's a vehicle parked, then they're going to have to sway to the left side. That's what, in most cases, we put them only on 40-foot streets instead of on 30-foot streets. Just based on the experimentation we've done with the fire. They prefer it only on wider streets than on a narrower street.
Okay, well, maybe I'll have some more questions later, perhaps. Does anybody else like to question now?
Should I start?
Go ahead, Mr. Westman.
Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead.
In our previous case on Allen, one of the ways you get to Allen is by driving down Lake. And I noticed that Lake has speed humps on it that have been lumped. My question is, two questions actually. What is the width of Lake, say, between Allen and Western, where those humps that have been lumped are, and is that a primary emergency route?
I don't
recall if it's, the map is hard to read on that scale, but I'm sorry.
We've, as far as the streets we've put in lumps, they're all wider than 30. So I'm sure it's 36. Okay, so we put them on the 36-foot width. So you have 8-foot parking, and then you have a 20-foot strip between the park lanes, and then we center, we put one lump on one side and then opening in the center and then another lump. When it gets narrower, that you really start squeezing the lumps, and then people take advantage of that too, because now if it's in the center of the street, they try to use those two openings, and they go right in the center to avoid going over the humps. So whereas in the wider streets, most of the time we have a center line, they sway at least on one side of the street, they put one set of tires through there and as they go over the hump. So it's really, experimentation we've done, and on narrow streets, it hasn't been as effective, and fire was not in favor of it.
Kind of the reason I'm asking is I'm aware of speed humps that have been lumped on some fairly narrow streets in Glendale. Broadview comes to mind, for example, that are probably, if not under 30 feet, pretty close to 30 feet. But I understand the problem you're talking about. I mean, I've been tempted to do it myself when there's no oncoming traffic, but you're right, you're straddling the center lane line if it's lining up your wheels to go.
I mean, it's not an ideal, in general, it's not an ideal thing. Even input we received from fire, in general, as they've stated, they're not in favor of any speed humps or lumps in general. Lumps have worked better in terms of at least it gives them fire to go through them. But still, from what I've seen with the experimentation we've done, they still have to slow down, try to measure themselves to get through. When the street gets narrow, it becomes worse. So still, they slow down the 5 to 10 seconds that Jeff Halpert mentioned. And in general, we've always debated this thing is that, when that one emergency response time comes up where every 5-10 seconds counts for a life-threatening situation versus, every day you have a speeding problem and people who pull out of their driveway and they're facing with some kind of a speeding problem, or children, they don't want to cross the street. It's relatively a risk factor. How much is the risk? Is it better to deal with the day-to-day speeding issue, or deal with that one emergency or a couple of emergencies that may happen throughout the year where they have to respond? So it's not a right solution for either one of those, but it is a problem that the residents, and we feel and we see that every day.
Okay, and of course, you've touched on, the reason that concerns me. This is really a balancing act here. When I see, a petition that has a large percentage of support in the community, and also that there are definitely, it seems to be a speeding problem on Western. I noticed southbound on Western, going back toward Glen Oaks, you've got one of the little permanent radar signs up there on the right-hand side of the street, which tells me that, you have a speeding issue there. So I'll defer to my colleagues for their comments.
Okay. John, a couple of questions for you. Is the street 36 feet wide? When I drove
It's 30.
It's 30 feet wide. And we're allowing parking on both sides, and I'm assuming it's grandfathered then, because for a ladder engine, you need 18 feet minimum, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I'm sorry, for?
Clearance, 18-foot minimum clearance for a ladder engine?
Well, our standard fire road access requirements in the fire code are for 20-foot access roads, and that's to allow two fire apparatus to pass each other. But if an aerial ladder is setting up operations, then it does take more than a standard lane because of the outriggers.
The outriggers, but
yes.
there's in the Los Angeles Municipal Code, there's an 18-foot minimum requirement. Now, I'm not sure if the Glendale MC has one in it, but if you're to factor that in, one side of the street shouldn't be allowed for parking. But I don't want to open another issue here, but when I drove it, it looked extremely narrow. The other thing is, in the study, the ADT showed, I believe, 1467, which was lower than Allen, and that was a little surprising to me. It seemed like it's much higher when I field checked it. But regardless, I mean, it did meet all the requirements. Now, my 2 cents on speed lumps, they shouldn't even be considered. They don't make any sense. They make things much worse. Somebody who's violating the speed limit by 20 miles per hour, I guarantee you they will shoot for those 2 openings and try to make it. Now, it does delay emergency responders because they're conscious and they know how to respond, and they're very careful. So I'm not going to even talk about lumps here. That's not an issue. I mean, I'm against that, period. It doesn't make any sense. Now, having said that, we need to find a compromise. There's definitely speeding problems. Again, when I was out there, I did see a car definitely going more than 40 miles per hour. It was a no-brainer to see that. It's a cut-through traffic. It's access to the freeway system. And I'd like to hear, of course, more from the public and from the other commissioners. But right now I'm leaning towards a compromise of 2 speed humps versus 4 humps. I know it will delay some emergency response, but unless you come and tell me that I'm going to have a Glendale police there enforcing basically speed every day, which it's not going to happen, you know it and I know it, and then we need to do something about it. The advisory speed limit signs are a no-brainer. I think we should have them, but it's a residential neighborhood, so those are my comments for now.
Well, if you don't have any more preliminary comments, shall we do?
I have actually 2 questions, Mr. Bagdanian. The speed feedback equipment that is south of that location, why was that installed?
I want to say it's been maybe over a year or so, because we just bought a whole bunch of them. So we've installed some permanent ones, and then we have some that we rotate them. So they're not permanently installed. So we move them. I don't have the exact date.
So were you trying to achieve some kind of a speed reduction because of those speed feedback equipment you installed there? You wanted to warn the people about their speeding? Were there speeding issues further south?
Yes.
Western?
Yeah, we do have speeding in that stretch of Western in general. It slows down a little bit when it gets between Glenwood and Glen Oaks, because there the volume is about 9,600 cars a day. It's pretty high.
Right.
But as you go further north, then the volume drops, but the speeding picks up. So based on requests, we've tried to put in these radar speed boards just to get people's attention. But honestly, after a while, people, they just see it and then they still speed past it even though the speed limit is displayed that they're over.
So it's effective at the beginning and then
It's in general, it's an effective tool, but it's not a permanent solution because, we move them around and we see that after a while, people still complain that, yeah, you install them, but it's not working. It's a tool we try to do everything, and it works sometimes.
The second question I have, on the eastern part of Weston and the south side, there's a vacated area. What is that? There's no houses there.
A reservoir.
It's a reservoir, and yes,
Okay.
there's no
Now,
house.
on the east side of the street, there is parking allowed next to
Yes.
the reservoir?
Yes, parking, and I'm sure you can hear from the residents, whenever we've been there, there's a lot of on-street parking by the residents, so it's very tough.
I mean, I don't see a reason to have a parking on that side. Maybe we can eliminate the parking on the east side and put 2 lumps at the southern border. I mean, we have to be creative. I agree with Commissioner Sahakian, and we have to do a compromise here. We have to be a little bit more creative with this situation.
When, Commissioner Mangasarian, when we looked at it, if there was 2 speed humps, we felt that at both ends you have a stop sign. So whoever is coming from southbound or going northbound, they're starting at the stop position. It's in the middle where we measure the speed. That's where they pick up the speed. So we figure, if there is one, you put one at farther away at almost 1/3, and then the next one, the 2. That way we usually spread them about 300 feet at the maximum, so that at least you start in the stop position from the stop sign. If you go about 350 feet or so, then you hit one hump, and then you go over it. There's a certain distance. By the time you pick up speed, you hit the second one, and then you're already at the next stop sign.
Right.
So it just spreads it. If we can design it to do the best. Again, I think I would like to see the parking usage on the side of where that reservoir is before we restrict it, because that is a very tough thing to do in residential streets, because we have narrower streets that fire department has asked us to restrict parking. When we go to the residents, says, okay, we need to restrict one side, and they don't want to flip a coin. Which side is it going to be? So it's always very tough.
Absolutely, I agree with you, but something has to give here.
I think if the fire department feels that side will be helpful in their response, that we restrict parking in that area, that's something we can look into it. We like to do a survey. We like to inform the residents before we restrict the parking, because most of the time it becomes a huge problem.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Well, if you could remain, we should let the residents speak, if you wouldn't mind, stay seated.
I'll be happy to remain.
Yeah. We'll ask the residents to speak, and since maybe parking or restricting some parking at some level might be one of the solutions, if any, so please give us your comments on how you would feel about if we restricted parking, intermittently, one side of the street, in front of your house, if it came to that. So please let us know your feelings on that. Our first speaker is John Krikorian. Please state your name for the record.
John Krikorian, resident at 1519 Western. And 17 years I've been kind of an advocate to try to do something to slow down traffic. I want to thank the residents that pulled this petition together to have this meeting. And I also appreciate the fire department's concern. About last October, they saved my life on a quick response when I had a heart attack. So I appreciate what they are going through. It was mentioned that 6 dogs, 10 cats, and so on were killed on Allen, around that area. What if there were children killed? Would you feel different? I have 22 grandchildren, 8 children myself, and it's a hazard for them to come out to get in their cars to go to their homes when they visit. It's very narrow, as I mentioned, and you showed us our street Western, our portion that we live on, but he didn't have any cars on it. You should have showed it with cars. There was no autos parked on either side on the slide that you showed. It's a very narrow street, and even today coming here, and it happens quite often to me, pulled out of my driveway, I look both sides, looks fine, I start backing up, all of a sudden coming down from Rand Park, they're coming like 100 miles an hour, and I say, where did that car come from? I have even passengers saying, look out for me as I back up, and those cars pop down from Brand Park at a high rate of speed. It's coming down a hill. I guess it's a natural to increase your speed. I think we have a lot of different options. The 4 humps were mentioned, 2 stop sign. I didn't hear, maybe halfway down. Closing Brand Park, that one gate that was there because of gangs that were happening there, some incidents. They closed that gate. That reduced traffic tremendously. And people started using an alternate route, going down Grandview, going south. So that's an alternative. And I think it's a choice that you have to make between saving lives for the fire department and residents. And eliminating parking on that street would be a disaster. I mean, it's a narrow street. Each house has maybe probably 2 cars, 3 cars. And that place down by the reservoir, usually there's cars parked there too. I don't know where they come from, but probably one side of the house for the people that live there. So I'm in favor of doing something. And whatever you come up with, 2 humps, 1 hump, stop sign, closing Brand Park, an alternate route for the fire department. You know, he mentioned that there was 20 to 25 response to Brand Park. What type of responses were they? Were they fire? Were they life-saving? What type of response was there? Again, I want to thank the fire department because they saved my life, the paramedics. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. Thank you.
Mr. Krikorian, on the parking, I don't think, I mean, we haven't decided anything, but
I understand.
Parking wouldn't be, I mean, my view wouldn't be eliminated entirely, either on one side or the other. Maybe it could be you have the bump, and then within X number of feet on either side of that bump, there's no parking. So, I don't know, maybe lose a dozen. I mean, pick a number of spaces on the street. I don't know if that's feasible, Mr. Bagnanian. So,
Essentially, in most cases, we don't mind having parking on both sides because it by itself narrows down the street and reduces speeding. So by eliminating part of the street, one side of the street from parking, you may pick up speed.
no, but what if you didn't eliminate one side, but you interrupt it? You have it down both sides of the street, and you have the lump at a certain place, and on either side of the lump, on both sides of the street for, as I say, 2 or 3 car lengths, some number. You don't have parking there, so the department can swerve. If that was one of their issues, then maybe that eliminates that issue.
Chairman Ford, honestly, it's a problem. Even if you take 1 parking space out in these neighborhoods. I mean, we have a problem. We actually, when the installation of these speed humps comes, we send a letter specifically where we want to install it. And I will tell you, every time we end up, shifting it this way or that way because one resident, even though it's helpful, they don't want it in front of their driveway to the north, to the south. So as you put the hump in and you start, taking out 15, 20 feet on both sides like we do at stop signs, it becomes a problem. And then we end up, either we have to force it upon them or it's not a, easy thing to do. It is doable. I understand your idea, but fire department, again, they can speak for itself. I mean, a large truck, if they want to maneuver, 15, 20 feet is not going to be enough for them to go, bypass any parked cars, or if somebody is stopped and they need to go around them, it's not going to be enough.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. And the other speakers.
If I could add one other thing.
Oh, sure.
You have parking on both sides of your street that you live on?
Oh, I'm just trying to help a solution.
understand.
I think I'm in favor of parking in general, so don't get me wrong. Mr. Jim Roris? Rory, please. And your views on parking, if that was a part of a solution.
I'll state my name. It's Jim Rorig. I live at 1450 Western Avenue. I'll try not to duplicate anything Mr. Krikorian said. He made some good points. I've been a resident on Western for 28 years. Raised 3 kids. We used to play in the front yard all the time. Now I have grandkids. I got a picture. Prop. They come to visit, but they play in the backyard now. It's just too dangerous out in the front. All the families on the street pretty much have the same problem. You don't see kids out in front playing anymore. And that kind of has affected the quality of life on our street. I appreciate the the council meeting and give us opportunity to talk about this. Everyone has already agreed that there's a traffic problem, and there's already been damage to vehicles on the street. We had a car totaled out in front of our street on the opposite side. Side mirrors get taken off all the time. I've replaced 6 in front of my house, and I'm not the only one. That's why we're hoping the speed bumps, or humps, I guess is what you call them. Signs are good, but the people that are speeding aren't going to watch the signs. They don't care about the signs. We need something physical to slow them down. I appreciated Mr. Sahakian's comments about maybe going to 2 to help with the response time, and we're willing to compromise for any of that. I walked off the distance between Western and Winchester. If the police or fire want to come up and make a right turn on Bel Air, it's 300 feet or so. Then they can make a left and go right up the mountain. No humps there. Mr. John, who had mentioned about locking the gate there, that was a good suggestion. We noticed a decrease in the speeding when that gate was locked. And I talked with the guys down at Station 27, and they have a key, so they can still get access to there if they want to. But we'd like to see the fire department use the Grandview entrance whenever possible. It's just a wider street and a little more accessible. Let's see. I'm just concerned about the people on our street who worry about every day, the speeding that goes on day and night. And I know the fire department goes up at that street, a certain amount of times, but we deal with it every day. And I would like them to maybe compromise with us a little bit so that we could get our street back and get our kids back outside playing. Ball in the front yard's kind of a national pastime. It'd be fun to go out there with my grandkids and play ball again. I had a question. The other thing, when the gentleman talked about the peak speeding time is 2 or 3 o'clock, that's when kids are coming home from school. It really would be a good idea to get those speeders to slow down at that time of day. I don't know if maybe the police could swing by at that time. I don't know how that would work. And the parking issue is a problem. There's cars parked there all the time, which sometimes helps slow vehicles down. But a lot of times, the guys that really don't care, it just makes things more dangerous. So it's kind of like, what can we do? My wife's almost been hit. Gentleman up the street's wife was almost hit the other day. They're thinking of moving because the street has just gotten too dangerous. So we're hoping you guys will come up with some good solutions. Maybe everything that you've suggested would work. Signs, postings, humps. We'll take whatever we can get. And I want to thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you.
I have one question. You've been living there for 28 years.
Yes, sir.
In this 28 years, how many times have you seen speeds being enforced by Glendale Police Department in that stretch?
I've actually talked to the police officers that come out on the street on calls. I have seen police officers there enforcing, especially after I've made a call, but after a few weeks go by, that goes away. I would like to see more police presence there, but I know they're busy. There's a lot more other things going on in our city now that it's gotten a lot larger. The officers that I've even talked to have suggested that I call, and that's what started this whole speed hump thing, is one of them said, you guys need to get speed humps here, So that's what started the call. I made the call, and Mr. Chow got the ball rolling for me, and I wanted to thank him, but he wasn't able to be here. So if you could say thanks for me, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bree Mosley. Please state your name.
Bree Mosley at 1454 Western Avenue, and we can outdo him. We've been there for 50 years. When we moved on Western, of course, there was no freeway access, there was no freeway, and things were just fine. But over the years, it has accumulated. In the old days, people would sometimes be watering their yard, and I know one gentleman down the street, a speeder came by and he turned the hose on him. Well, you certainly can't do that in today's world. And as far as the police are concerned, we have had police cars at the corner by the reservoir, but they're not catching people going in our block. We've had people up on Mountain, but they can be seen. The only time we really had a terrific catch of speeders was when one Sunday we were coming down Western to our home, and as we got closer to our house, there was a policeman behind a parked car. And my husband, after we pulled in the driveway, my husband went up and talked to him, and he said, "It's like fishing in a barrel." He said, "I'm just raking them in," because the ones coming down could not see him behind the parked car. So he wrote a lot of tickets. But other than that, it's really hard to control with police presence. You know, if there's a car parked at a police car, they'll slow down before they get to the corner. But we in the middle of the block, that doesn't help a lot. And I had a question as to like Mr. Gregorian, I thought, what time did you take that picture with not one car? We have, it must have been in the middle of the night, but we have a terrible parking problem. People don't use their well, hardly anyone uses their garage, and very few use more than one car in a driveway. And so they're out in front. And I know it's very convenient. We raised our children and had 3 or 4 cars. We had to maneuver. We had to back up and let somebody out and that kind of thing. And I know it's a hassle. And now people just park out in front, so they don't have to do that. And I just appreciate your taking your time. And if you did eliminate parking on one side, I'd prefer to have my side eliminated so that I can see when I get out of my driveway. So I know that's a touchy subject, but I do appreciate your taking your time and doing whatever you can to help us out.
Thank you. Any questions? Carl Mosley?
Can I just say?
Very quickly.
Yeah. I divided up the street into thirds for the speed humps, if there were 2, just for your information, because I know you asked about that. But this one, the one down below would be between 1436 and 4, and the one up above would be like 1520, 1524, right in that area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mosley, please state your name.
Carl Mosley. I live at 1454 Western. I've been a resident on Western for 50 years. I was also a highway engineer, and I also spent quite a bit of time in subdivision work and traffic engineering. As such, I think I got a lot of comments through the years from incoming neighbors. They wanted to know what they could do about the traffic. And early on, I certainly wouldn't have considered speed bumps. But it's gotten to the point where I'm ready to live with them. For the record, the grade on Western in this block is 6%. I've surveyed up there, I know. And for the record, we've also had at least 2 families I know of purposely left Western Avenue. They couldn't take it anymore. They moved away. I understand there's a 3rd family about ready to move because of the traffic. I think a radar sign might help. I certainly think it would be worth putting one out on a trial basis. As for parking, that strip alongside the reservoir on the west side, it's getting more and more parking, but for years it was virtually blank. But there are maybe 2 neighbors are parking over there now. I think it's just a matter of convenience so they don't have too many cars in their driveway. But I think that might be a solution. It's almost half the block. And that might fit into the scheme of two speed bumps. Although I'm a little bit dubious about making it a no parking zone. It might just encourage the cars to speed up. But you guys have a job on your hands. Good luck.
Thank you. Agajanian? Sorry, Arno.
Good evening. My name is Arno Agajanian. I'm 15 years old, and I've been living on Western Avenue my entire life. I experience firsthand every day how drivers speed through our street. I personally would like to support putting speed bumps on our street. I'd also like to add that I'll be driving next year, and it will benefit me knowing that I will be driving on a safer street. Thank you.
Thank you. Dinah Agajanian?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dina Agajanian. I'm a proud mom of Arno Agajanian, and I lived at 1444 Western Avenue since 1996. I moved here from Playa del Rey, California, to raise my family in a safe neighborhood with good schools. And it has been so, except the first thing I noticed about Glendale was the high speed of traffic on surface streets. Our street is particularly bad. The cars do not just go fast. Sometimes all you see is a blur of color going up or down the street. Some cars must have speeds over 80 miles per hour. You can't even see the car. You just see a color. And this is several times a day, every day. And for your information, I live right across from the water reservoir. I never let my kids or my dogs play in the front lawn for fear that a car might jump the curb because of their speed. I believe that these race car drivers on our street are ruining our quality of life and jeopardizing not only our safety but our lives. I believe that emergency vehicles can easily go up Grandview Avenue, which has an entrance to Brand Park, and I believe that the huge benefit of speed humps greatly outweighs the small burden to these emergency vehicles. The most puzzling aspect is that I hardly see police patrolling or giving out tickets on this particular stretch of street. I am very pro law enforcement, and I would love to see more police cars. Therefore, these speed drivers know that they can speed on our street without fear of getting a ticket. If they happen to run over a dog or, God forbid, a child or a person, so be it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our final card is Celinda Geller. If there's any more speakers, please give me your card. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Celinda Geller, and I live at 1418 Western Avenue. Obviously, we need to have some kind of compromise. I understand that. I guess I want to reiterate, I have 3 young children. My next door neighbor has a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old. We live right across from the reservoir. I only live three houses up from that stop sign, and it is still unbelievable how fast they go. We treat our front yard like a parking lot. I can't let my kids just run about, and they're young, and so it's hard to live that way. I would say about the parking, I find, because very few cars park, at least in my section, along the reservoir, except at night when we get parkers who shouldn't be parking there. But it is very fast. I find that you can speed a lot faster along that section because there is not the congestion of double parking on our street. You really can't have 2 cars pass at once. And because there's so much traffic, you regularly have to pull over to let another car go by. But once you get up to our section, it's just ridiculous. And we would be happy to have a speed bump right in front of our driveway. I promise, no arguments there. And I just really appreciate trying to find a solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the public hearing is closed. We have a difficult issue. Commissioners, you'd like to start? Mr. Weissman?
Well, it's, a tough one. I don't see how it's, going to be possible for everyone maybe to leave happy today. But as I said before, we have a balancing act here. We don't want to slow down our emergency responders, and at the same time, we have a lot of demand and a lot of need to address speeding on this issue of Western. You know, my worry is that, you know, in the event of a compromise solution, you know, 2 speed bumps may not be enough to address the speeding, and it may be, you know, too much in terms of delaying emergency response. But I think if we're going to be able to do something that's effective, we can't rely 100% on increased enforcement. We know that that doesn't is not a solution, you know, 365 days a year. So I think I would reluctantly be willing to support a compromise solution, maybe involving 2 speed bumps and maybe involving parking restrictions. One of the other things I did want to mention, and the last speaker alluded to the fact that because there's relatively little parking on the stretch on the west side of the street next to the reservoir, that's an invitation for cars to go faster because the street doesn't appear to be as narrow at that point. I noticed further south on Western, you know, south of Bel Air, there are white lines painted on the street in order to give a little bit of visual narrowing. And I'm wondering if that might also be a countermeasure that we could employ in the upper part, in addition to doing all the other things we've discussed, such as speed limit signs or a temporary or permanent radar sign there. But I think I would be willing to support a compromise that contained those elements.
You're talking about the edge lines, the solid white line on both sides.
That kind of delimit the parked cars.
As far as parking, I think the worst thing we would do is to consider eliminating some. As a matter of fact, at the reservoir, if we didn't have parking, I would suggest chokers or some type of striping to narrow it down. It's been proven before that you will increase speed as you widen the street. I'm going to propose to amend the motion basically and to compromise and install 2 speed humps and have staff study it, come back with the location of these speed humps. If you guys want to take another shot at it, but I'm ready to vote yes for 2 speed humps at this time.
I'm leaning towards installation. You know, I'm going against the recommendation of the city staff not to install, but I want to vote. I would recommend to the city council install the speed humps, but I would also request that there's more study needs to be done. All the issues that the commission has raised are good issues. Look into the possibility of eliminating parking on the west side of the street and the southern part, and maybe putting 2 lumps or maybe 1 lump, then putting 2 speed humps on the continuation and going with 3 speed humps on that. But I am very much leaning towards approving for installation of speed humps.
4 or 2?
4.
I've made a list of the issues that have been raised here. Mr. McDaniel, have we ever, has a commission ever approved lumps or humps on a street where the fire department has opposed them?
Yes, we have. I think we've installed them on Mountain, part of the Mountain Roswell traffic calming program. Mountain is technically an east-west, the only east-west street that is on a fire emergency response route. Jeff is here. I think that was more of a part of a master plan we did for the entire neighborhood, and we did install them on Mountain. Again, for the record, fire department was not in favor of it, but again, overall, looking at the overall safety reduction of speeds, that was installed. So Mountain comes to my mind. That's been one. Fern Lane is also another one because it serves the sports complex. There we did a combination of things. Again, those are things that slows down the fire response when, especially it's a public facility at the end. So coming back to what we're faced with, there's a balancing issue as far as.
Well, how has the mountain thing, has there been, since they've been installed, has there been an issue with fire response? I mean, obviously it's not ideal, but has there in practice been an issue?
I would defer to the fire department. I mean, as far as specifically if there has been issues with.
Can one of you speak to that?
Hi, good evening. I'm Tom Probst, a operations battalion chief assigned to a shift platoon. We have had the mountain speed bumps in for a while, and that is one of our main response routes from the east to the west or back and forth, but primarily from the college area to the Brand Central area for moving resources back and forth and incidents in that area. Although we don't get a lot of calls that are up in that area on a regular basis, as much as the Brand Park area, but it does delay our response to the area. There are several, there are more than 2 humps, bumps, lumps, whatever we want to call them, through that area. There's probably more like 6 to 8 to 10 through that whole stretch. So it does delay our response to that area.
I mean, to a point where it's unmanageable? I mean, obviously it must be working out okay because they're still there.
Well, to respond to locations that we would take those routes, which is primarily in the north area, the hill there, we can access through Campbell. We can access up Colina, up to Sunshine. So our resources can also take other ways as well to get up into the mountain areas, which sometimes they do. If they're coming across that area, then they'll take that route, and it'll slow them down. It takes time. These vehicles are very heavy, so once we navigate through those, we will brake, go over them slowly, and then to accelerate again, it takes time to get back up to speed, much slower than an automobile. So for cars, they can accelerate quicker and get back up to speed that they're traveling. However, for fire response vehicles being much heavier, there's a delay in that pickup again. So it's not only slowing us just to get over the bumps, it's a delay in also getting back up to speed to get moving down the road again.
Plus, this is uphill, so it would be that much harder.
Yeah, but we haven't done any specific studies, as far as I'm aware, from the fire department from before and after. We do track our response times, so we have that data available that we could probably we could look at and evaluate.
But if I may, even then, it's not a fair question, because maybe that one case that the 10 second would have made a difference, you haven't seen it yet.
No.
And it could be in the future.
We are very concerned about public safety. That's our job. And we're so much concerned that we want to get to an incident as fast as we can, as safe as we can. So as much as we're concerned about slowing traffic, which is a primary concern of ours, we're also concerned about having our personnel arrive on scene as quick as possible without these delays. So it's like we've mentioned already, you've mentioned, it's a tough balance. I can't tell you on a specific day we had a delay of so many seconds over another day. We never know from day to day where we're going and what time of day it is, what the traffic conditions are. At Nibley Park in that area, if there's a lot of people in the park on a weekend, we're going to slow down for that regardless if there's bumps or not. And that will slow us down, but we do that because we have very professional drivers that are always concerned about the road conditions, people, cars, animals in and around the roads. Also weather conditions. They'll drive across that area probably more aggressively on a day like today than they would on a rainy day when the roads are slicker. So our drivers are very professional. They're very conscious and aware of where and how they're driving. And our goal is to get from point A to point B as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Well, one of the issues that has been mentioned is possible alternate routes. Is that feasible?
Excuse me?
An alternate route, go up either side of Western,
to
the east and
well, Winchester and Raymond, I believe, are probably narrower than Western itself. So for us, we do have we've had incidents on those streets, and we'll get there. But Western allows us more of a direct route. A concern I have with some of the cutout bumps is I've seen cars actually when I've been I was an engineer for 16 years, which is driving the apparatus. So I have a lot of experience driving our fire trucks. And I've seen vehicles coming at me, straddling those, going through those bumps. So that increases a hazard right there. I've seen people, ignore the slow down the speed to go through them. And my concern is...
When you were in a fire truck, you mean?
Yes.
So you're saying that the lumps actually make it more hazardous for you to drive because cars are more inclined to ignore you coming at them and aim for the center?
Not more hazardous for me to drive through, but I've seen cars come the other way, straddle just as I would go on the emergency. Day-to-day, normal driving, we don't go through the cutout only during emergencies, but I've seen cars drive through those on a day-to-day basis. My concern is, and you may have addressed it before, and I'm sorry I was late getting here, but if we put the bumps on, in this case, Western, that may divert those cars to Winchester or Raymond, where they're going to come down those streets, and then you're going to be faced with the same issues on those streets, and may have to put some calming measures there as well. And it dominoes out, unfortunately. It's difficult. It's not a fix one street and the whole problem is solved. But Western is a main thoroughfare more than others, so I'm sure the traffic volume is much higher on Western.
Okay. Did we have any more questions?
I do. How do you feel using Grandview as an emergency response route, in addition to Western?
We do use Grandview very often. Like you mentioned, the amount of calls we have in the Brand Park area, those have been for accidents, injuries on the ball fields in the park area, and we've had several incidents, over a dozen rescues in the hillsides. So we respond there quite a bit. Many of our resources do up Grandview that are coming east towards the area. Many of our resources coming from the west will go up Western, including Burbank, when they respond in with us, which is an automatic aid agreement we have with them, or responding in the city. They'll oftentimes use Western. So we're actually using both routes to get there, depending where the resources are coming. We're not going to have a resource pass a good thoroughfare to get to another one to come back on itself to get to the top, if we can avoid that.
Now, one of the other things that was mentioned, they said the residents said traffic was much better when the gate at Brand Park was closed. Did you have, and I guess you have a key, was that an issue? Was that a safety issue for you? I mean, how would that be as one solution of cutting down traffic, just lock it?
We don't have a key, we have bolt cutters. We can,
okay, well,
we
even
can get
better.
in. We can get in if we need to get in. We respond there 24 hours a day. I've been there, 2, 3 in the morning for hikers up in the hills.
Well, so how would it, if the park and the city agreed to put the gates back, would that be an issue for you?
The gates, no. I mean, it causes us some delay to get the gates open again. I mean, there's that time frame again, but we understand the need for security and the need to have those gates if that's what need to be there.
And how would, I guess, 0 is ideal, 4 is worse, and 2 is not as good as, it's not what you'd like, but it's better than 4, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there regardless. You put 8 there, we're going to get to Brand Park if we need to get to Brand Park. Each one, and this is also an upgrade, which has been mentioned, but it's just caused some delay, which for us is critical time to any incident or rescue. Seconds count, and that's our concern, is we want to make sure we can get there as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions. Just going down my list again, we have the white line down the side, which was mentioned. The speed sign was another thing. Parking restrictions, there doesn't seem to be much clamor, much in favor of that. Then I think somebody mentioned chokers. I know I haven't seen those in this country, where you put a post, maybe it's flexible or not, where you have to slow down to thread a post.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, we do have chokers. We install them on Fern Lane. We narrow it down and we put in traffic circles. We've used them up. Honestly, they're not that effective, maybe 1 or 2 miles. And then the issue comes, again, you have to take away on-street parking. Drainage becomes a major issue when you bump out the curbs. If it's in mid-block, it's worse.
Well, I mean, what I've seen in England is you don't bump out the curb, you just literally put a post.
I know.
Partway in the street, so the gutters continue as normal.
Yeah, those are effective, but they get knocked down, and it becomes a maintenance issue. becomes a visual issue. People don't like them because now we have those pylons that they bounce back and up, and people go over them. Again, wherever you're going to put them, there will be a removal of on-street parking. We've tried them before, but after a while, they become a maintenance issue, and people keep asking that they be replaced, removed. So I think what Commission may consider, if you're considering installing, depending how many, the number of speed humps on Western, considering it's a fire emergency response route, that we also consider that restricting any future installation of speed humps on parallel streets. This case will be Raymond and Winchester. So at least gives fire an option that if in case they want to, although they're as narrow, in case they're in an emergency, there's a couple of fire trucks going up, they don't want to take Western, at least they have an option that those two streets that don't meet the requirements, their volumes are much, much lower. I don't think their volumes are going to reach 1,000 cars a day to qualify for a speed hump. So that's a consideration for the future that we can note that in our Commission action, that at least we protect the side streets. I don't think they're going to reach that level of speeding and volume that Western experiences today.
Well, not speaking for the fire department, but I would think, I mentioned those alternate routes, but you have to make a right and then a left, and already you've lost more time than you probably would have lost with the speed limit, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, all I'm saying is it's as a precaution that in case, anytime we install speed humps, people say, oh, the traffic's going to shift, now you're going to have to put more and more and more. I would say, in majority of cases, we've never done that. Anytime we put in a speed humps, we've never gone and put in one on the next street because the traffic shifted. After a while, like you said, people give up making a right and a left just to keep, avoid one or two speed humps or three speed humps that they have to go over.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Commissioners, maybe, we have a variety of things. We have the motion of 4. Some people have suggested 2. I think personally I would favor maybe more study, including maybe closing the gates, maybe 2 versus 4, maybe the side stripes. Do people have a view?
Question, John, if we're to put 2 of them, what would be the longest distance? I don't have questions for you guys. Okay.
Thank you.
What would be the distance between the humps?
Normally, in order to try to maintain a 25-mile-an-hour speed profile, the ideal spacing is about 200 to 225 feet. At the extreme, you go to about 275. So in this stretch, 2 still will do it. You really are pushing the limit. So 3 will provide a more effective version of putting them in. Obviously 4 is at the high end where we would normally use, and having heard what the fire department is saying, that will probably have the most impact, the 4. So somewhere between 2 and 3, and we play with the spacing to make it effective, because one of the concerns as staff had is, we could be, we can put any number of these speed humps and then residents will be back again and saying, oh, the 2 wasn't effective, you should have done 4.
And then that's my concern.
That's what, we can explore that a little farther, but I think somewhere, 2 might be still effective, better than nothing what they're experiencing, but in between you will have some speeding still happening.
Mike, I think these people have waited long enough, and I don't want us to go back, do another study, 2-3 months later, we come back. I think we've discussed all we could discuss. I think studies have been done. We have all the data. So I feel that we can make a decision today. Now, what I'm thinking is 3 versus 2. I propose the 2, but I don't want us to be in a situation where we have to remove the 2 because we go to 3 in the future, and this economy, that's extra cost to the city, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. So, based on everything that was discussed, my position is, you guys know my position on lumps, I'm not going for that, but I would propose 3 humps, and I understand absolutely the emergency response delay in this, but I stopped by the location twice. I would be moving out of that street. I would not live on that street. It's as simple as that. And parking is a problem. Eliminating parking is not a solution. So that's going to be my proposal to move forward.
Now, are we talking about humps with no divots or lumps with divots?
Well, for me, lumps, it doesn't make any sense.
So you're saying humps, not lumps?
Yes, I will not vote. I will not vote for something, put my name on something, knowing that it will create and worsen the situation. I've seen them, I've done studies myself. I would say 60 to 65% of the larger cars, the SUVs, will do the same thing these fire trucks are doing, the engines are doing, to bypass the bumps and go through the openings. And now you're creating a head-on collision type of a situation, especially on a street that's 30 feet wide. It just doesn't make any sense.
So you're suggesting 3 humps?
Yes.
Mr. Weissman?
And I'm going to 3 because of the distance, I'm sorry. Because of the distance, I did do a diagram, and the distance will be too long between the 2 humps if we were to do only 2, which will give them enough time to accelerate and speed and then slow down again.
Yeah, well, it's a tough one. I agree with you about the issue with the distance. I think, especially given what Jono just said about the optimum spacing. You said it was like 1,600 feet, basically that stretch of between Mountain and Bel Air. So yeah, so two of them even with the extreme spacing is not going to be good enough. Yeah, I think I would support 3, again, humps, not lumps for this. And it's, with a great deal of reluctance because we're adding maybe another 30 seconds of delay to emergency vehicles that need to go up there. And I'm definitely mindful that could be an issue for some in the neighborhood. One of the things I did notice is that for going up Western to get into Brand Park, once you've crossed Mountain Street, there actually are humps and the access road there that goes into the park. So that, at least, is if that entrance is being used, is going to be a delay. So yes, I think I would be willing to support 3 humps if we also are mindful of maybe doing some of the other things like the striping or some kind of
signage, the advisory sign.
Yeah, the signage, all the rest of it, and anything we can do alongside the reservoir there. Maybe not in terms of actual chokers, but if there's any other engineering solutions, that will work for that area, I would support that.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
Deputy?
I don't know what kind of a math my plan commissioners are using here. Mr. Bagnell, you said 1,600 feet, right? If I divide that by 3, it's like 500 something. Am I wrong in my math?
No, what it is that we have to have a certain, we don't put in...
we divided by 4, right? That's right.
Yeah.
So we divided by 4, that's like about 400 feet.
Yeah.
You
Plus,
said
we try to
ideal-
stay away 250 feet or so from stop signs. So at both ends, you take 250, that's 500 feet.
Okay.
So now you're down to 11.
So about 1,000 feet.
So for that, you're suggesting here is based on the recommendations or the Caltrans recommendations?
Yeah, we have it's in our traffic calming manual. It's a very effective, everybody pretty much uses that spacing. But most of the time, once Council Commission approves it, we actually go out there and we lay it out, make sure it's not near a catch basin. If the resident has a problem with the location, we can shift it one way or the other. Within 5 or 10 feet, we're able to install these humps. So that leaves you about 1,000 feet where you can, if your commission is recommending 3, that we will play with the time, with the spacing, make sure we put it as equal distance from each other to make it effective.
Okay, yeah, I like to set aside feelings, and I'm going to go with 4 speed humps at this location based on recommendations by Caltrans and your guidelines.
I'm sorry, you'd like 4?
4.
If we were to vote for, say, 3, do you have enough? Do you know? Is that enough for you to get started? Or Mr.
Chairman, I was going to mention when I interrupted was, if, depending on what commission decides, given the time it's currently taking us to process this the speed hump request, we can go ahead and work on the engineering of it, get it installed, make it part of one of our contracts in order to do it as expeditiously as we can. The signage, the striping, looking into the parking, all of those things can be done quickly so that we can address their concern as soon as possible.
Now, in your view, would 3 work almost as good as 4, or is 3? What's your view on 3 versus?
My view is 3 is better than 2. If we're going to do it, if we're going to install it, and it is a fire emergency response, if we're going to do it, at least do 3, because then we're trying to solve the problem. With 2, it's almost halfway there, and you're going to pick up speeds at one end or the other, especially in the downhill side and in between the humps, because we're going to have to stretch it as much as we can. So if Commission approves 3, then it's going to be more effective. Ideal is 4, but we're dealing with fire emergency response issues, so I think 3 might be a better compromise than a 2.
Any more discussion? Do I hear a motion or an amended motion from what's here?
I can introduce an amended motion that stands on, and if you can help me with the verbiage, basically to install 3 speed humps on Western within the limits, correct? Do we need anything else than that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Is there also a recommendation for striping and signage?
Or you want to bundle that in?
Were you going to do that? Is that part of your motion?
Absolutely. Well, the striping, I mean, we're not going to approve that until I see the study back from staff. That's why I wanted to keep it aside. The signs, definitely, we can include the speed advisory signs in there. But the striping, unless, John, you tell me, let's put it in.
I would like to have the discretion to work with our traffic engineers to put in the striping. If it's appropriate, it fits our design standards, we will do that. We'll look into where the reservoir is. Is there anything else we can do to narrow it down? And maybe keep the parking, but maybe have some striping in there so it basically gives a narrower width, and hopefully that would reduce the speeding.
So based on that, let's keep the other traffic calming measures out of it and just do the 3 speed humps.
So our proposal is against staff recommendation, actually, right? Because staff recommends not to install any.
That's correct.
We would have a motion, an alternative motion to what's in your packet.
Correct.
Would be
Correct.
recommending the 3 speed humps and the advisory signage. Now, the question is about the advisory signage.
Those signs are standard, again, advisory signage that it shows in advance of the speed humps, advisory speed of 15 miles per hour over the speed humps. Those all will be installed. We will also look at the installation of the speed limit, pavement marking, signage, as well as in the interim while we're working to install the speed humps. We'll go ahead and put in the portable message sign anyway, radar message signs, just to, again, advise the motorists about the speeding.
And one thing, Mr. Chair, I want to be on record. I would have not made this recommendation if Grandview was not an option. But I think Grandview is a good option as an emergency response route. It's another 300 feet. I think it's a compromise.
So I think we have a motion basically for 3 humps. Is there a second?
I'll second.
This is for 3.
Yeah. My recommendation is.
I understand. So I should be voting for the 3, and then we'll see where that takes us.
I mean, it's majority, right?
Well, majority rules.
Commissioner Weiss.
Roll call, please, for 3.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Yes.
Sahakian,
Yes.
Yakubian, Angasarian,
Yes.
Chairperson Fada.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for all your efforts on this issue. What we will also do, I made a note about that gate, the Brand Park gate. I'll talk to the Parks Department and see if closure of that gate can also help the traffic coming down Western. So we'll look into that as well.
And when can the residents expect to see something?
We will send a notice out as soon as I have a contract, potentially in the next 6 months. And I say that because there are some contracts, if we can add it to that contract, we have contingency, we'll go ahead and add it. If we don't, when we go out to bid, it takes usually about 3 months to, bid the contract, award a contract. So I'm saying 6 months at the longest, hopefully sooner than that. Meantime, we'll try to do the signage, striping changes so that at least they got some form of an improvement on the issue that they're faced with speeding.
Okay, well, I hope the residents are satisfied. Three's better than none. Next item, please.
Item 6, Commission staff comments or updates.
Mr. Bagliani?
Mr. Chairman, we were trying to schedule a meeting on the South Brand parking ordinance. That is the preferential parking ordinance that Commission has reviewed and studied in the past. The ordinance has been prepared. We tried to get a date, a special meeting date, but it didn't work out for a variety of reasons, and also one or two of the commissions would not be present there. So we're going to hold a regular meeting of the commission in August, and we'll have, hopefully, I have not heard that any one of you is not present, but we're going to hold it on the same date. That way we don't have to create any other dates, because also some of the rooms that were not available. So the August 4th meeting in August will still be on the South Brand ordinance.
Any comments from commissioners?
I do have one. Status, John, of the no U-turn sign, Mountain, and the 2 freeway off-ramp, just east of that location.
We have asked Caltrans to provide that. As you know, Caltrans is not the fastest moving agency these days because of their budget cuts and so on, and we're working on that. Also, for your information, we are working with Caltrans. We've already met with them as part of our traffic safety committee that we have with the police department, and we're analyzing high accident locations, arterials, safe route to school areas throughout the city. We meet once a month and we go through them. The intersection of Brandon Central and Sanchez and Good, which is our high accident location, we've met with Caltrans. They promised us to make some changes in the timing, the all-red timing, because we do have a lot of people who are running. And also there's some issues with the placement of the heads, the view of the heads. As people coming southbound, let's say on Central, they see the next signal, the green, and they run the first one at Sanchez. So we've already made some adjustments, still not perfect. We're working with them. So a number of these Caltrans-related off-ramp issues, we're working with them, trying to get them to make those changes that are necessary.
The sign is on Mountain. I thought it's on public right-of-way. It's at least 100 feet north of...
They have 150 feet
on each side?
On either side.
Okay.
So I will make a note to follow up on it, but I did bring it up with them. We have a few of those throughout the city at the freeway ramp, signage, striping, signal timing changes that we have some difficulties.
And when you're doing that, I mean, one of my pet peeves has been on Brandon Central is Burchett. Seems out of sync with everything.
That one, Burchett is
I was told
controlled.
it was an old signal, but I don't know if it's...
Well, the other part is Burchett is controlled by us. The freeway ramps are controlled by Caltrans. And they like to run it at a certain time.
I understand, but maybe when you're going through all this, maybe you can somehow look at Burchett, because I don't know how many times I've gone north on Brand or Central, and the light turns red at Burchett. And there's another street, I'm blanking on the name.
We have those, yeah.
So maybe there's a way of timing that in with what Caltrans ends up. Any other comments?
I just wanted to ask staff if maybe we can get, maybe not necessarily tonight if you're not prepared, but just a brief update on the improvements that are being scheduled for the at-grade railroad crossings on San Fernando Road.
Oh, sure. I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, if you just have a minute to
right now I can, Mr. Chairman, if you wish, I can give you a quick update.
Sure.
No problem. I'm very familiar with them. Starting with the two crossings, which is Grandview and Sonora, we bid those things and they've been awarded, so they will both be upgraded. with the latest state-of-the-art emergency prevention for the railroad tracks, as well as advanced preemption for the trains. We were going to be starting construction probably sometime in September, as soon as the contract is finalized and negotiated. The council has approved those two, to the tune of almost $8 million.
And they'll be regraded there at particularly Grandview?
Yeah, Grandview is going to have a major, improvement at the intersection because we're improving the approaches to the track so that we can get rid of the hump that is there. So that will be a complete upgrade. And there's also some storm drain pipe that's going to go in. So Grandview at San Fernando is going to be a large construction for a good 12 months of the year. We will be working with the neighborhood to make sure that they know about all the construction activities, and Grandview will be closed at some point during construction, then Sonora will be closed at some point during construction. Moving to the south, Broadway Brazil and Chevy Chase is being contracted out for construction by SCRA Metrolink. We're working with them on the design that's been completed, and it's out to bid right now. The bids will open in August. So those at-grade crossing will also be improved. It's going to take probably about 12 months. And then Doran Crossing, we're in the process of we've gone through a process of mediation with all the agencies, City of Los Angeles, SCRA, Los Angeles Department of Transportation, number of homeowners associations, and we will be going through a settlement hearing, in fact, this Friday with the judge being assigned to this case to decide whether or not Doran will be closed. We will be temporarily a one-way operation westbound, and looking into the possibility of a grade separation that is also being explored as part of that settlement. So myself and Ms. Sansoni have been involved in the whole process, and hopefully if the administrative law judge approves the settlement agreement, it will go to the Public Utilities Commission, who will make a final decision on that, and accordingly we will be making improvements that are needed.
Now, the current settlement proposed is to make it one way, correct?
One way in a temporary basis until the permanent solution, which is a grade separation, can be finalized, and there is funding for that portion of it. Metro is working on it, and if we can get about $35 million, that's what it will take to do that grade separation at that location. It appears to be there is funding for it, and we're working with Metro on it.
On all these crossings you're dealing with, is there any thought or consideration given to what high-speed rail might look like if it went through there, or what the current bond money? Because presumably that might be grade separated.
High-speed
and
rail.
I do all your work, so I just wonder.
There is a possibility that, again, depending on when and if high-speed rail comes through, that a lot of the work we do, it will be undone. In other words, there either have to be a grade separation if the rail goes over these crossings, then we'll be okay. But if it has to, we have to raise and we go where the street goes over, then all of that work has to be undone. But Doran Street, for sure, as part of the high-speed rail project, has to be closed. That's where this grade separation option is being looked at. In conjunction, we're also working with the consultants from the high-speed rail. So whatever they're doing on an ongoing basis in terms of our at-grade crossings in Glendale, we work with them to show us, so we make sure that we agree with the design or the concepts that they're exploring. But it's still quite a bit down the line.
I'm sure it's many years, so probably whatever you're doing now will have some value.
Yes. If that would be enough.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, Jono, there's a special meeting called for next month.
That meeting, you should be getting an email. That meeting is canceled. That's what I mentioned earlier, that we will have our regular meeting. I believe it's August 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And that would be where we will have that. There will be no meetings on August 7th. August 27th will be our next meeting.
No special meeting. Any other comments? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.